and welcome to this very special Indianomics, where we have former Reserve Bank of India Governor Raghuram Rajan and Professor Rohit Lamba of Penn State University to discuss their just launched book, Breaking the Mould, Reimagining India's Economic Future. Rajan and Lamba argue that India's recent desire to join the global manufacturing club by providing subsidies through PLI and protection through higher tariffs is a recipe for protecting possibly less efficient industries and creating manufacturing jobs at a very high cost. Instead, they recommend that India skip manufacturing and jump from agriculture to services. They recommend that the government concentrate on improving our services exports, where we're already very good, where we have inherent strengths, and the money saved from PLI subsidies should be spent on educating and skilling India, all the way from primary schools to the highest cutting-edge research. A related plea from them is that economic policies are best made in an ecosystem of debate and discussion rather than the stifling of criticism. Well, Dr. Rajan, Professor Lamba, thank you very much for joining me. Dr. Rajan, did I summarize the book correctly? If you can add or edit.
Almost. I mean, look, I think the temptation is to say we are against manufacturing. We're absolutely not. What we think is that manufacturing, we need to capture the high value-added parts of manufacturing. If we do that, the low value-added parts will come. Instead, what we seem to be doing is trying to capture the low value-added parts without thinking of the fact that we already may have an advantage in some of those high value-added parts. Let me give you an example. When you look at cars today, when you look at the Tesla, there's 40 million lines of code in the Tesla. We are a coding superpower. Why don't we focus on the high value-added part of the Tesla, for example, instead of focusing on the lowest value-added part, which is assembling the product? Take, for example, Apple. Apple is worth $3 trillion. Foxconn, which does the assembly, is worth about $50 billion. Apple is worth 60 times Foxconn.
Yes.
That's because it's captured the high value-added parts. What we're saying is India already has a competitive advantage there. And by all means, low-skilled manufacturing is useful to create more jobs, but there's also lots of jobs available elsewhere in low-skilled services. Let's not have a manufacturing fetish where we think we have to be like China, start with the low end and we will move up. There are lots of impediments in that way, amongst which are that the world has moved on.
Fair
so let's
point.
recognize that reality and reimagine India's growth.
Okay. Professor Lamba, you want to add?
Yeah, bang on. So the way we think about this in a kind of a more storytelling way is the story of the smile curve, right? Like when you make a smile, you see that the highest points of the smiles are the two ends.
The smile represents the global production chain.
Right. Got it.
Right. So the smile curve basically tells you that the highest value add is at the left end, which is the design, the R&D, the conceptualization of a product. The bottom end of the smile curve is the actual manufacturing, and the right high end of the smile curve is the marketing, is the financing, is the products appended to the end product that you're manufacturing. For example, in the case of the iPhone, it's the iTunes, the various apps and so on, right? So what has happened over the last 20, 30 years is that global competitiveness in manufacturing has drawn down the returns of this middle part.
Okay.
And so what we're saying is that now in the 21st century, like 1/4 of the way into the 21st century, for India to aspire to the low end of this value-added chain of product is both a poverty of intellect and ambition. Okay. And I think we want India to think bigger, to really kind of march its way into the middle income category in the near future.
Okay. Well, let me come specifically to the points that you'll have raised against the production-linked investment scheme, the PLI. Dr. Rajan, already we are seeing Apple trying to source other parts from Indian companies. News broke just 24 hours ago that they have contacted aerospace, software companies which provide services to aerospace companies, etc., to also provide services for Apple. So there is a value addition that they're already trying within India. And just to hark back, how did Maruti come in? It came in as a completely knocked down unit, right, in the 80s. And then, it became semi-knocked down. And then now we are an auto ancillary hub at Manesar. So don't you think we can become that in iPhones or in, electronics?
No, we can. I'm not saying that we can't. The question is, do we have to subsidize our way into this? Apple is looking for alternative production centers to China. In fact, it's Foxconn that's looking for this.
Yeah.
And, the China plus one strategy will play out. Some people will come to India. India's market is huge. And especially if we follow this process of putting up tariffs, people will bring some of that production in. The question is that we are already doing some value-added parts. When you talk about software developers, they're already producing 20% of chip design in the world. So we didn't need subsidies for all that. They were coming anyway. The bottom line we are trying to argue, let's not get stuck in this PLI subsidy versus not debate. Instead, let's say, how can we create many more high quality jobs in India? And the answer to that is we have to create many more high quality, trained, capable candidates. Whenever we talk to entrepreneurs in India, what is the biggest constraint on your production? It is finding high quality workers. And so to some extent, that has to be our biggest focus. How can we create our biggest asset, which is the 1.4 billion people, into people capable of getting those really good jobs, of attracting manufacturers here because they find so many people. This is happening in high quality services. They're looking for consultants for their companies. They're looking for people who will generate trading platforms. Goldman Sachs has its second biggest office, in fact its biggest office outside the United States in India. We need certainly to create more people who can get those jobs, because we are running out of high quality people who can get those high level jobs. But even at the lower level, we need far better trained workers for the companies that we're talking about. And so my sense is, let's focus on the fundamentals, then we will attract all the companies we need.
No, that's motherhood. We have to concentrate. Go ahead, Professor Lamba.
Yeah, even the auto example that you gave, right? It's, our ambition, where is India's Honda? Where is India's Hyundai? Where is India's Tesla, right? So the ambition should be bigger. Ambition shouldn't be that we want to become the auto ancillary hub of a foreign company, right? Like we're just kind of trying to map out a path in which, if we have to grow rich before we grow old, it does require sort of thinking differently.
No, that point is taken. But Dr. Rajan, even if you have to look at, to come back to PLI, it's a kind of friend-shoring and on-shoring and near-shoring that the whole world is in. And so we also need, for instance, to make active pharmaceutical ingredients, API. PLI is available for that because our pharma companies were way too dependent on some APIs from China. So there is a place for it, isn't it?
There is some place for companies to rethink where their vulnerabilities are, and they're doing this across the world. But, to some extent, my worry is we're back to the old, let's put the tariffs up, let's select some winners in this industry and that industry. On what basis are we doing all that? And how are we so sure, after investing all these subsidies, first, do we need the subsidies to get people in? Will Apple come in anyway? And second, that when you invest these subsidies, are they here to stay? Or the moment those subsidies end, already we are seeing a bunch of companies saying, continue the subsidies, because without the subsidies, we cannot possibly be competitive manufacturing in India. This is the old way. It's a way that we got away from liberalization. And I'm just surprised how many economists in India are not raising objections to going back to the, did you get the favor of the government or did you not get the favor of the government? Instead, let us focus on where our strengths are and build on those strengths. Okay. And again and again, we come back to, we need to create the human capital that is available, that is able to take India into the 21st century. Trying to follow the path of growth of the 20th century in an attempt to sort of make India great, I think is a mistake.
No, I think that point is taken. I don't think anybody stands for cronyism, and if it's happening, you perhaps read Ninan's edit in the last Business Standard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no one's advantage to have cronyism. And, you know, even when there is PLI, no one supports that, even if it's happening in pockets. But Professor Lamba, you know, to come back to the point about manufacturing itself, it is given in economic theory that manufacturing creates more jobs, isn't it? You know, a person in manufacturing uses a lot of services. Whereas if you have a services industry, like say, launderers in a hotel industry, that is, and it doesn't have a multiplier effect that manufacturing has.
So first of all, the multiplier fact is debatable, but I think what we are arguing for is prioritization. So let me give you a concrete example in response to your question, and then we can come to your question. Is that, you know, India is planning to set up the Micron plant for chip design, chip fabrication in Gujarat, and the total subsidy bill right now of the central and the state government put together is going to be, by the government's own estimates, 16,500 crores. Okay, and approximately 5,000 jobs are going to be direct jobs are going to be created. Okay. You know, India's higher education budget is 44,000 crores. So you are spending more than the central government higher education budget. So you're spending more than 1/3 of your entire budget that is allocated to IITs, IIMs, TIFR, Indian Institute of Science, central universities on generating these 5,000 jobs. So it's a question of priority. Of course, we want manufacturing jobs in India. Of course, we want all kinds of jobs at various skill levels in India. But where would you put your resources so that the multiplier effect that you are talking about would be the highest? And what we are arguing in the book is that at this point in India's growth story, that multiplier effect, both in terms of the direct growth that it will create and in terms of the positive externality it will have on human capital and the economy in general, is to train our labor force, is in primary education, is in higher education, is in fixing the malnutrition problem. 16,500 crores is a lot of money from our government's own estimate to generate 5,000 jobs. And I think we must also ask ourselves, as Raghu is suggesting, will certain companies come to India anyway because of the China +1 global strategy? Okay. And so if we are to allocate our resources, where should we allocate? Why is the foreign direct investment in India gone down in the last 2 years? Okay. Right? So if we are succeeding at the China +1 strategy, why are we not being more successful in foreign direct investment? Okay. So again, just to reiterate, you know, nobody, you know, in their right mind should be against India manufacturing more. But what are the quality of jobs that you are getting? Fair. How many jobs are you getting? And in what way are you getting? And how are you prioritizing? Remember, India is still a relatively poor country. How are you prioritizing your limited resources? This is very important.
And fair point. It's very important also it's very important to ask the question, do we need to go through manufacturing in order to get to services? Remember, all the rich countries are 70% of the jobs are services. Yeah. So to argue that services are a bad job is just simply not recognizing the reality that, you know, the ultimate endpoint is services. to be a rich nation is to do those services. What is interesting is we are creating a lot of service jobs, which the rich countries are seeing us as competitors. So, you know, we talk in the book this example of, you know, a partner in a consulting firm coming to India to recruit.
Yes.
Why? Because consultants in India are much cheaper than consultants elsewhere. Plus, they can do business directly by presenting to clients in the rest of the world because of what has happened as a result of the pandemic. So do we prefer to create low-level, low-skilled jobs, or do we need more consultants? Now, the immediate response is, of course, everybody can't do the consultant's job. Absolutely. But that one consultant will create a number of low-skilled service jobs in India. The laundry, you were talking about the hotel, the tourist guide, the security guard, the biggest source of jobs in India. So there is a lot of employment. In fact, India's employment as a share has been stagnant in manufacturing. A lot of the employment of people emerging from agriculture has been in services. Yes. In other words, let's not look at services as a downside, as a bug. No. Let's look at it as possibly India's source of comparative advantage.
Okay. No, I think the effort is to have both and not one at the expense of the other. I think there is a lot of lauding of India's global services exports as well. Well, time permitting, we'll come back to this manufacturing issue again. Dr. Rajan, Professor Lamba, I have to take a quick break. I'm coming back with the other political questions that you're raising in the book. Back in a minute.